Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Ascension, The Deviler's Diva reaches a turning point in her life with this powerful E-Steam series story. Get E-Steam Ascension at online booksellers today. There's a complete difference between the original Star Wars trilogy, the Star Wars prequels, and the current trilogy. Now, this current trilogy differs from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy in that it's a matriarchal series of movies. And because episodes 7 and 8 are matriarchal movies, there's a lot of feminism in these movies, in the themes, and a gynocentric, overreaching arc. And that's one of the things that makes episodes 7 and 8 very difficult to watch because as I take a look at the story for episodes 7 and 8, they remind me of Alice Walker's The Color Purple. Now, Alice Walker was a feminist writer back in the not the late 1980s, the mid 1980s. And she wrote The Color Purple, a National Book Award winning book about an abused black female and her struggles during Jim Crow. And this book was turned into a movie back around 1985 or 1986, I think. And in the movie The Color Purple, almost every man is portrayed in a negative fashion and a negative light. And I notice a lot of parallels between Your Color Purple by Alice Walker and Star Wars episodes 7 and 8. Because in Star Wars episode 7, we have this Rey character. And the Rey character is supposed to be the lead hero of the Star Wars movie. And instead of giving her a character transformation arc that is the equal of Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars trilogy, where it's about a boy learning how to become a man, we get a feminist theme where we have this female character who was originally designed to be like Luke Skywalker. Unfortunately, what happens is because feminists don't want the character to go through any sort of pain or hardship, the Rey character becomes a Mary Sue. And she becomes a Mary Sue in that she knows how to do things that it took Luke Skywalker 3 movies to do over a character transformation arc. And this is the big problem with the Rey character and the big problem with the feminists as it relates to the Rey character. They do not want the Rey character to go through any sort of character transformation arc because they don't want the character to go through any sort of pain, hardship, or loss. And what they don't understand is if characters don't go through pain, hardship, or loss, those characters do not grow to become fuller, richer characters. This is why the episode 7 was an extremely shallow movie and a movie with no heart, no soul, and no depth. Because, as in contrast, when you look at episode 4, A New Hope, it is about Luke Skywalker beginning his journey into manhood. And that's all because the original Star Wars was a very patriarchal film. And the reason why it was patriarchal because again, it was about a boy learning how to become a man from other men. Because Luke Skywalker starts his journey learning manhood, starting with Uncle Owen on Tatooine, and then he progresses learning more about manhood from Obi-Wan Kenobi, who tells him he has to learn the ways of the Force. And he learns a bit about piloting from Han Solo, who is sort of like an older brother to Luke Skywalker. So he's learning from a series of men about how to become a man. And this was a very paramount thing in the story of the original Star Wars trilogy. Now, as the trilogy progresses, he goes to Hoth in Empire Strikes Back, where he learns more manhood lessons from older brother Han Solo, and then he goes to meet Yoda, who is similar to a grandfather figure. So Luke is learning constantly from different men, different skills. He learns survival skills from Han, and then he also learns more about being a Jedi from Yoda on Dagobah. And as the series progresses, he eventually goes to confront Darth Vader, and then learns Darth Vader is his father. So there's a key theme here that's related to patriarchy. Moreover, there's more of a theme related to two-parent households because as I look at Star Wars, it really was made during a time of two-parent households, because George Lucas himself came from a two-parent household, and as he was building the mythology, he came really from his own family background and his core family values as he built up the story, which was really a commentary on World War II, because that's what Star Wars really was. It was a commentary on World War II, all these different planets and galaxies. They really represented different countries, and they were all about coming together during this war, and all these people of different races and ethnicities to take on this empire. And again, George Lucas really came from the perspective of a two-parent household, and you could see that all throughout the original trilogy in the way that the males acted, because even Han Solo, who was a bit of a rogue, showed respect to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He deferred to male authority from Obi-Wan Kenobi. He showed respect to other men, and Luke Skywalker showed respect not only both to Obi-Wan but to Uncle Owen and to Han Solo, because he respected the hierarchy of male figures and male authority figures. I saw that key to your original Star Wars trilogy. It was one of the most paramount things, because the original trilogy was very much about patriarchy. And as the films progressed, Luke submitted to male authority like Yoda, and he also showed respect for Darth Vader, and even showed respect even as he was fighting the Emperor in Return of the Jedi. So there was a lot of patriarchal things in the original trilogy, and even in the prequel trilogy, you saw Anakin showing respect for male authority and male authority figures. However, when we get to this new trilogy, it's a very matriarchal theme, and that matriarchal theme leads to a very difficult to watch film, because, again, the writers just don't want this Rey character to go through any sort of pain, any sort of loss, any sort of hardship, and they don't want her to grow, because what they want her to be is a strong female. But what they don't understand is that the only way a woman becomes a strong female is if she goes through the same things that boys do. But the feminists, they want to make Rey a pampered, spoiled, coddled little girl, and they want to make the women these super strong super women who never have to go through any sort of hardship. Now, in contrast, we look at Princess Leia, and she went through a lot of different things in these Star Wars movies that led to her becoming a stronger character. And again, that goes back to the patriarchal story. I mean, this is a woman who was captured, she was tortured, she was made a slave in Jabba Leia's barge, and all of these things led to her becoming this tough tactical commander and this very intelligent woman who could work under pressure and solve problems under pressure. We all saw that because of the patriarchal line in Star Wars. However, when we get to Star Wars, the new trilogy, we get females who are super women, like Leia flying in the air after her ship gets damaged. That's an incredibly ridiculous scene, but it's something related to feminism and gynocentrism, because feminists, again, they want to make characters that are strong, but they don't want to see women go through any sort of pain, hardship, or loss. And the same thing with Rey, again, because Rey is a master of the Force, even though she goes through none of the training that Luke went through. She goes through none of the loss Luke went through, where Luke literally lost his hand in a lightsaber battle with Darth Vader, or loses things like his R2 unit on Dagobah, or goes out and loses friends like Biggs Darklighter and many others in that epic battle on the Death Star, things that shaped him, molded him, and led to his character transformation. Like, no, Rey doesn't go through any of that. She's just this perfect person who can be a great pilot, even though she's never flown anything. She's piloting the Millennium Falcon, and that's supposed to make us believe that she's a master of the Force, a great pilot, and she's supposed to be on the level of Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker, even though both of those men went through full character transformation arcs that led to them becoming the characters they were supposed to be. And when I look at this whole Star Wars, that's why it's a very hollow trilogy this time, and a very shallow trilogy this time, because they make no efforts to try to make these heroines grow and change in the same way that the heroes do. They want to give them girl power, but they don't want to give them any of the experiences that would empower these females to be the equal of their male counterparts. They want to make them super women, and they want to make them super women at the expense of the men, In the same way, Alice Walker wanted to make Celia Superwoman at the expense of the men in The Color Purple. Because in episode 8, there are efforts made to emasculate almost every man on screen, make every man look like they're incredibly stupid, make every man look like they're incredibly dumb. And this was also done in episode 7. And the way they literally step on the older male figures is really sad because it shows how little respect that the writers of this gynocentric Star Wars have for the male characters or the whole history of Star Wars, because the way they murdered Han Solo was really sad, because Han Solo was a major component of the original trilogy, but they decide to have Kylo Ren just kill him and then drop him into a pit, showing how little respect they had for men, male figures, and male authority, because it was all about making Rey look like a superwoman and then making the men look like they were and had no control of their emotions. Because when I look at Kylo Ren, I look at a guy who I see that comes from a single parent household. And this is one of the other things that relate to the gynocentrism that runs deep in these Star Wars movies. When I look at these movies, I see how deep the gynocentrism runs with this Kylo Ren character, because this Kylo Ren character, again, he acts like a guy from a single mother household. He has no control over his emotions. He's very effeminate, and he acts very immaturely, and he often flies off the handle. These are all the traits of a male who comes from a single mother household. And with Rey, I also see traits from someone who comes from a single mother household, in that she's trying to be very masculine and she's trying to act like a man. And that's another trait that I've seen run prevalent in single mother households and households that follow gynocentrism and feminism. And when I look at this whole Star Wars franchise, I see how deep feminism has hijacked this franchise and how it has colored the franchise. However, as I look at the bigger picture as it related to feminism hijacking this franchise, I can also see how it's a commentary on the United States over the last 40 years and how much things have changed over the last 40 years as it relates to the American family. When George Lucas first created Star Wars, again, he created it from his frame of reference in life, which was a two-parent household. However, the new producers, Disney, they're coming from the perspective of today, and a lot of people are coming from these single mother households, and because they come from these single mother households, they have a very distorted picture of what manhood is and what womanhood is, and they see things really from a more feminist perspective, just like many people saw things from that feminist perspective with Alice Walker's The Color Purple. That's why I say the new trilogy often mirrors that of The Color Purple. And The Color Purple was a movie and a book designed to promote feminist views of what life was like in the Jim Crow South and push a feminist narrative and a lesbian narrative of what life was like in the Black Jim Crow South. And when I look at this new trilogy, I see a perspective of that of feminists and lesbians, and they're trying to push their perspective of what they see the world of Star Wars to be like. However, that's not what Star Wars was originally intended to be. The Star Wars fantasy was originally designed to be a world that was supposed to be about the journey of Luke Skywalker's journey into manhood. Moreover, it was supposed to be a world where people of all races and alien races and ethnicities could come together to take on a common threat and find out what was great about everyone. Men and women fought in that intergalactic war, and it wasn't about elevating one gender or one species above another. When it came down to Star Wars, everyone was the same, everyone was equal, but when we look at this new trilogy, there's a plan to try to make this female the superior and make her appear to be better. However, this whole plan all falls flat because none of the feminists who want to try to empower Rey want to make her go through any sort of struggles or hardships. Again, they don't want her to go through anything, and they don't want her to lose anything. And this is why many stories with heroines often fall flat, because the writers oftentimes become emotionally attached to the heroine, and they want to try to protect her from any sort of struggle. Now, when I write heroines, I always make them go through a character transformation arc in the same way that the men go through the character transformation arc, because I understand that once a character goes through the character transformation arc, we can see how they have grown and changed from their experience, and the reader can learn from that experience. And examples of this include the Eastine character, who was the lead heroine in The Temptation of John Haynes, and that character went from a journey of being an evil she demon to becoming someone who embraces her humanity in The Temptation of John Haynes, to eventually reconciling with her father throughout the Isis and Eastdeem series, learning to get a closer relationship with Christ, and then eventually in Eastdeem Ascension, rising to another level because she deals with all of her unresolved issues as related to her family issues and her past in past history. Now, another character I did the character transformation arc with was the Matilda Crowley character in the Spinsterella trilogy. Now, in the Spinsterella trilogy, I show how this Matilda Crowley character grows as she becomes a part of the goth subculture. And this is a journey where this Matilda Crowley character goes through a lot of pain and hardships, and those hardships shape the woman that she eventually becomes in the final book of Spinsterella. Now, in Spellbound, the Matilda Crowley character has to deal with a lot of racism from black people who attack her for being biracial. She loses a jacket that is destroyed by bullies. She watches her brother get shot by a drug dealer who was trying to chase her, and then she didn't want anything to do with him, and he wanted to defend his sister, and then he wound up getting shot, and she feels guilt from that. And she also gets suspended from school for getting into a fight, and gets into several fights with these female bullies. And all of these things shape this character just in the single story of Spellbound. And then in Legendary Mad Matilda, the Matilda Crowley character goes through further hardships where she's hosting a rave, and then the drug dealer who wants to sell drugs at her party, she kicks him out, and it leads to her getting arrested. And then that leads to her having to go home to her mother, who disciplines her with a severe beating when they get her home. And all of these things, again, shape this character and are a part of her growth as a person. But most writers these days don't want to put heroines through that, and that's why we get shallow movies like those in the new Star Wars trilogy. This new Star Wars trilogy is like many other products that were designed with heroines in them, where they give them shallow stories, shallow character development. And the reason why they do that is because oftentimes when you have feminists and SJWs in charge of a story, they often are on the outside looking in. And they look at something like Star Wars and they don't understand all of the themes of that story. They don't understand the substance of that story. And they don't understand the ideas and concepts that lay the foundation of that story. When you look at the original Star Wars trilogy, there was a lot of patriarchal themes in it, and everything in it was related to manhood. There was a possibility of making a story about a woman learning how to be a woman. Unfortunately, because feminists think from an emotional perspective, they wanted to give Rey powers, and they wanted to give Princess Leia these powers, but they didn't want to give them the responsibility that went with those powers, or the lessons learned on how to be responsible in using those powers that Luke Skywalker got on his journey as he went through the original trilogy. And because they didn't want him to go through her to go through that type of journey, or Princess Leia to do that, we got these shallow movies with no heart, no soul, no substance, no character, and no depth. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct titles like the Spinsterella trilogy or the Eastdeem series, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.